Welcome to Mermay.
Hello there and welcome to a very special event on the Screen Queen. I am the biggest fan of mermaids, and we have this thing called Mermay that happens, every May, so I thought I'd just make some waves and put my own spin on it here on the show. Growing up, I loved anything that had to do with mermaids. My mother and my friends will tell you that if the powers that be could make it that I could be a mermaid, hell yeah, I'd absolutely do it. I'm not the best swimmer, but my goodness, I would try. One of my favorite Disney movies is The Little Mermaid. One of my favorite animated films is The Little Mermaid. Mermaids are also a big thing where I grew up in Virginia, so it was kind of hard to escape mermaid culture. But, when you look at mermaids in cinema, it's kind of an interesting history ordeal on how far they have made waves in Hollywood. So I thought, let's start with the movie that made it very difficult to have to portray mermaids any other way. So I thought, let's start with the movie that made Disney have a hard time portraying its mermaid. Let's start with Splash. Now, I didn't grow up with Splash. I didn't know of it really entirely until I became a movie buff. But when I was younger, I do remember scenes from this movie. So it's one of those films that's not destined to be, the best. It's one of those films that's not the best film ever made, but memorable enough to know that it's going to stick with you for a long time. Like, that's kind of the magic of movies. And with this being like a modern day fairy tale that in its time was doing a lot of new things, so it became more than just a mermaid movie. So let's get into the film that Ron Howard passed on Footloose to do. This is Splash. So funny enough, Splash actually starts in 1977. There's a man named Brian Grazer, I don't know if I pronounced his name right, that is one of the major names in Hollywood. Like, you could throw a dart and you're going to find this man's name with a lot of popular projects. But he had this random idea when he was driving around about what it would be like to meet a mermaid and fall in love. Brian, you're preaching to the choir. I think a lot of people think about that. And by a lot of people, I mean me. So with the idea set in motion, they started working on it a couple of years, and then finally in the 80s, it felt like a safe time to start working on this fall in love with a mermaid movie called Splash. And when you know it, a certain guy from a show called Happy Days just happened to have a lot of connections. And this ended up becoming one of the best choices to have Ron Howard in charge of direction. And I'll admit, I had no idea that Ron Howard was the director. It probably shouldn't shock me, and I think I probably heard about it years ago, but I've never gotten the chance to actually experience Splash, and I can see where this led to a lot of his other films. One of my personal favorite films of his is Parenthood, which comes at the very end of the 80s decade, so I can see where the Splash made, a splash in other places in his career. But he also had the right connections because of his Happy Days. It's actually where he found the lead of the movie, as I found out. Tom Hanks was the 11th choice, actually. There were other actors that read for the role. Bill Murray was considered, PJ Soles was considered, but Ron Howard thought about when Tom Hanks played the crazy psychiatrist that had beef with Fonzie. And Tom Hanks was kind of, finicky about the role. You got to be a little picky and finicky about your projects. You don't have a Tom Hanks every day, but that's why he's Tom Hanks every day. It ended up becoming a really good move that he said yes, because it led to a very illustrious career and also a very big collaborative career with Ron Howard. Now, Madison the Mermaid is a different story. Oh my gosh. So even though Daryl Hannah absolutely blows it out of the water. She is fantastic as this literal fish out of water. But there were other people that were the possibilities of being Madison the Mermaid. So finding out who was almost Madison was way more people than I expected. Because this was somewhat a quiet project, but at the same time, if you found out that there was going to be an opportunity to play a mermaid and you were really into mermaids, or it just seemed like a fantastic idea, even though Daryl Hannah became the mermaid for the movie, it was almost going to be Jodie Foster, Rosanna Arquette, Brooke Shields, which when I read that, I'm like, oh, that would have been a very weird Blue Lagoon sequel, but here we are. Julia Louise-Dreyfus, who was a then unknown at the time, Melody Griffith, Jeannie Francis, Fiona Fullerton, Diane Lane, which I could have seen, Tatum O'Neal, Michelle Pfeiffer, oh, that would have also been beautiful. Sharon Stone, well, as long as she doesn't cross her fins the other way, then probably would have been okay. Kathleen Turner, which would have been interesting. Deborah Winger, well, I'm sure she could wing it. Lisa Weichel, but that's only because she was popular as Blair on The Facts of Life. Tanya Roberts, who didn't get her chance to be Splash, but didn't stop her from being a Bond girl the very next year, so at least something worked out for her. Shelley Long, I am very pained that I didn't get to see that now. Ali Sheedy, Molly Ringwald. It's got quite the cast list, like seeing the names and the tales, like some of them I can see, some of them I don't know what could have worked. I feel like this role worked specifically with people, and reading about how everyone worked with Daryl Hannah to make this comfortable and easy the best way that they could, and I found out that they had a hard time keeping up with Daryl. She was fast, but when she's the mermaid, she absolutely excels. She swam so fast the cameras could not keep up with her, so all of that mermaid swimming practice definitely paid off. She was basically the T-1000 in a tail. Now imagine if that was Robert Patrick in a tail, then there would be no stopping it. Daryl Hannah almost seemed mermaid for this movie. She said that she's been a mermaid almost her whole life. She would practice swimming as a mermaid, so she knew the form and how you have to have your abs kind of go up and down. And as someone who has practiced doing a mermaid, let's just say I don't have my sea legs or my land legs or any type of legs for the sea. Nothing, nothing at all. Tail or tailless, either way, I'm screwed. But Daryl Hannah's fascination and love for mermaids really makes her shine as Madison. Like, you can tell she's been a mermaid all her life without her being a mermaid all her life. The way she makes Madison the perfect fish out of water, it feels so believable. I've known about this movie and I've seen some of her scenes, but without knowing the plot or the name, I could very well tell that's a mermaid out of water. But I also found out how they got away with some of the things as Madison. Because they had to have her look a certain way, and Daryl Hannah also said that it was very difficult with the body dysmorphia to be comfortable with the nudity, they had some ways around it. She had band-aids on her nipples just to be able to give some privacy there, and her hair, now when you see her run, there doesn't look like she has anything on that's covering her butt, so she just ran butt-ass naked on there. As that front page says in the movie, Bare Beauty in New York City. That part is actually digitally animated. And I've looked at that, over and over again, just like a lot of people look at Ariel's transformation scene over and over again. And I wouldn't have been able to tell in a million years that was digitally animated hair. It is crazy. But Daryl Hannah also kind of suffered for how she had to be the mermaid. It was one of those things like, it was absolute hell and I enjoyed every minute of it. When you're in a suit, whether that is a Batman suit or if you're in, prosthetics, mermaid tail, you are without a part of your body for quite some time. So half the time she had to just remain in the mermaid tail, and talked about how hungry she would get, that Tom Hanks would come over and feed her French fries just to keep her going. So originally, John Candy, who plays the brother Freddy in the movie, was supposed to be the villain, but when he auditioned, it was just too good and they couldn't not see him as the brother of Alan. But then that leaves you without a villain to have to use. So John Candy came to the aid and said, I know a guy. And he knew a guy that, he wasn't up Schitt's Creek yet, but he was just getting his career going, baby. Eugene Levy. And I never knew that he was the villain in this movie. Well, villain, antagonist, pest, I don't know how to pronounce him, but that does seem a little bit more fitting, but it's funny how Candy just literally had a Eugene Levy in his back pocket to use, and they just thought, you know what? That'll make a splash. So now is a good time more than ever to talk about why Splash kind of became one of the most unique mermaid movies, but how it built trouble for other mermaid movies. You know, if you hear for a song from Lady Gaga, it's a wonder, oh, well, that's like Madonna. And then you got a film about, you know, a high-rise action situation. Oh, that sounds like Die Hard. It's not the same thing, but you can also see where the inspiration comes from, but the inspiration might be seen as copycatting. So anything that had to do with a blonde mermaid usually felt more like Splash. So Little Mermaid had a tough time in the 80s when they could not do their own original Hans Christian Andersen idea adaptation. You can't do a blonde mermaid because then it looks like Splash. So Ron Howard literally screwed over Hans Christian Andersen's own original blonde mermaid version because Daryl Hannah's was too iconic. Daryl's got some fucking power in those fins, man. It ended up becoming the ultimate mermaid movie that you couldn't even try to depict something because it would just be pinpointed to Splash, which is ultimately why Ariel has red hair. And it's because of Daryl Hannah. So in a way, with this not being the most popular movie, it was so synonymous with that image of a mermaid that anything just went back to Splash. Yeah, you can make any blonde mermaid, but there's a pretty iconic blonde mermaid in media that is going to be the most recognizable, and that would be Madison. But also, too, mermaids were still a risky move for movies. At that point, mermaids were starting to become very popular again, and the idea was starting to be stomached by many movie productions that, you know, wanted to try and put that into effect. I mean, Brian Grazer's been having this idea since 1977. When it finally got on board, it was going to be a risk that no one knew was going to pay off, and then to go so far that no one wanted to copycat or even catfish anything that looked slightly like Splash. But Madison's name is also kind of a unique origin when you look at it. The name Madison has now become very popular. I mean, shit, I definitely have the Bratz doll named Madison. There was no way you were escaping that name anywhere. But in a time like the 1980s, that was starting to become a popular name. It's the first two names that Alan's character mentions before settling on Madison for her real name and not going by or whatever that dolphin screech was. He says Elizabeth, and they says Samantha, and she goes, no, no, and my first reaction is, hey, what the hell is wrong with Samantha? Turns out that is the name of his then wife and his first child, so, yeah, I slowed my roll real quick, but that was pretty cool finding out that Samantha and Elizabeth were not just throwaway names, they're Tom Hanks family names. But also, too, it's kind of funny that it's named after a president's, street, and then later on a president does show up. There's this mention about how the president is going to be coming to, meeting because, of course, a president just happens to be thrown into the midst of a mermaid story, because, why not? But funny enough, I found out this film was screened for a president. Well, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan. And I know that's a name that not many people like to hear. I get it, people were for him or, just not. But think about a time like 1984. It's not every day you can say a mermaid film was presented to a president. Of all the films that came out that year, Ron Howard's mermaid movie about a random idea, I don't think Brian Grazer saw it coming that his little idea he had on the side of the road was going to be showed to the president. That's kind of cool. I mean, I hope it wouldn't be our current one, but, you gotta take some credit when you can, and no, it could be 10 times worse about what some materials are showed to. And especially having to find out that Jodie Foster was almost going to be Madison, that could have been a very different experience for Ronald Reagan, so, I like to think about that. So funny enough, there is another mermaid tie in this movie to this mermaid movie. In the film, when Alan and Madison are going on one of their dates, they stop by this one mermaid fountain. Alan doesn't know why this mermaid statue is just so special to him. The reason is just literally right next to him. And he says the statue be removed because, time is moving on and they're just going to put a whole bunch of new developments, condominiums, anything there. So this timeless relic is just going to be removed just like that. And Madison surprises him by getting him the fountain. How she got it through the door, I will never know, and I am okay with that. Turns out that fountain is now a part of Disney. So to have a film that Disney was very scared to have to mimic like Splash, now owns the fountain from the movie. You know, it's kind of a funny full circle moment. Couldn't have a blonde mermaid, so they took the fountain instead. So there was an attempt to make a future for Splash. I had kind of known about this, and I'm kind of glad for the time being that this was erased from my mind, but there was a Splash 2. No, not TWO, TOO. Clever. Really clever. Where Alan and Madison are returning to New York to save his business, and the other to save a dolphin in captivity. Yep, that sounds like sequel bait if I've ever seen it. But this was not on the big screen. This was on the smaller screen, and it did not have Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks' dynamic performance because, well, I mean, look at 1988. Daryl Hannah was just coming off Wall Street, and Tom Hanks was about to make something big of his career. So, yeah, there was no way they were going to be returning for this movie. So they got Todd Waring and Amy Yasbeck to come in as Alan and Madison, and can you imagine it was good? 3.5 on IMDb says otherwise, and that says enough for itself. But there was an attempt to try and make a remake of Splash, and this is still kind of up in the air. So the previous draft in 2016 of what the attempt at the remake looked like was Jillian Bell would be in the role of Alan's character, and Channing Tatum would be the merman. I mean, it's a premise, but putting Channing Tatum, who can be a fish out of water, who has that ability to just kind of look otherworldly or just kind of give a comedic performance, I would give it some hope that it would work well. I don't know what it would do because, I mean, obviously it's way past 2016. At this point, that is starting to be nostalgia. So that idea is probably just, washed away. But, not a bad idea for what it's like. But as of January 2021, the project is still in development, so who knows when it's going to wash back up. So I did find out that the real reason why this movie works is that the writer's wives saved it. I read that before I finished the movie, so thankfully this piece of information was relatively spoiler-free, but knowing that, it gave me a lot of hope, knowing, okay, thank God. There's always been hope, even in the 80s. I have never not known a movie that has been inadvertently or wholly saved by a woman's intervention, but yeah, it's a good thing the women intervened for this movie. The original ending for Splash was going to be kind of the way the climax went for the movie, not to give away too many spoilers, but it wasn't going to end the way a fairy tale goes. It was kind of more along the lines of its other alternative, The Little Mermaid being more set of, the couple doesn't end up together. But the wives said, yeah, this is not The Little Mermaid, they have to end up together. And the writers did say they're very glad they listened to their wives. Every single one of them. When I watched the end of this movie, getting to see, the emotional end game, it's worth it. It was nice to put my emotions in the front seat and just, throw logic in the back seat. Like, yeah, it's a mermaid in New York, but that's already a sentence that you're saying, so fuck it, go along with it. So I'm ashamed to kind of say this, but my favorite part of the movie has nothing to do with the mermaid. It's kind of funny, a whole thing about Mermay, and here I am loving the parts that's not about her. The comedy within the movie where the main antagonist, sort of kind of villain, Walter, is trying to expose Madison as a mermaid and has had many failed attempts, but it's the way that those failed attempts become a perfect parallel was comedy gold. When Walter splashes the wrong woman that he thought was Madison, she turns around and she's crying, and the husband slowly looks into the camera and goes forward just like, you're gonna be the last thing that I look at before you die, kind of a face. It took me out. I thought that was just comedy gold, and I did not expect they were gonna do it twice. Sometimes you can do comedy gold, and Ron Howard just knew how to do it, with a little help being up Schitt's Creek. So as the tides are slowing down for this episode, here's my final little tidbits. It's not a perfect movie, but it's a perfect mermaid movie. You know, you can't get anywhere in life if you don't start, and because Ron Howard made a literal splash, it paved the way for other people to try to do a mermaid movie. There was no replicating the beauty of, you know, Madison and Alan's romance, but it's still a beautiful modern day love story to take inspiration from, or just, you know, enjoy life for a little while. I can't deny the cheese eating grin that etched on my face when I got to see that final part. Like, it kind of restored a little bit of my childhood back to me to see this being displayed. Like, whoever was in charge of that knew this was made for people's hearts. The hearts of people who love mermaids, or the hearts of people that love romance, or the ones that just love both. It was great to finally experience this film, but I'd only seen in pieces when I was a kid. So getting to have it, you know, all together, I can see why people love this movie, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. It's just one that you have to see to believe. You know I had to go out on that joke. You knew I had to go on that joke. Thank you so much for being here for the first episode of Mermay. This was a wonderful movie to dive into, and I can't wait to get into our next one because it's going to be one of my favorite movies of all time. Some of you might know what I'm talking about if you're one of the OGs, and the rest of you, it's just going to be a surprise until it comes out next week. Until then, you can catch me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen for lots of details for upcoming episodes of the show, for exclusives and funny stuff and all that good jazz. You can find me anywhere. I'm on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. I'm probably in someone's head right now, and God help them. That's a hard thing to get rid of. So you all take care now. Stay amazing and make some waves. This is your Screen Queen, swimming off. Bye-bye!